He wondered, as he walked deftly through the impassioned traffic on the avenue, how she would adjust her life if he were to withdraw from it. How peaceful it would be to have no woman in one's life. These months away took on the appearance of a liberation, a temporary recess from a hateful existence in which he lived in intimacy with someone he did not know and would not now have chosen. He began again to speculate on the pattern her life would take without him. Abruptly it flashed upon him that the vague irritation of many weeks was a feeling of smoldering resentment against her. The displeasure that this realization caused him increased his ill humor and distaste. He began to dissect her with an acrimony that astonished himself. Her unanimated beauty seemed now only a thin disguise for an inert mind, and not for the serene beauty of soul which he had attributed to her. He suspected, too, a touch of depravity, perhaps only physical, but more likely mental as well. Reflection convinced him that her appeal for him was bounded by the senses, for witness his disgust and clarity of vision now that they were separated. How could he have been so blinded? Why, for him she had been the universe, a universe personal and unheedful of outside persons or things. He had adored her in a slavish fashion. He groaned inwardly at his own mental caricature of himself sitting dumb, staring at her in fatuous worship. What an ass he had been! His work here was done, but what was there to prevent him from staying away for 6 months, a year, forever? Never to see her again. He stopped, irresolute. What would she do? He tried to construct a representation of her future without him. In his present new hatred, she became a creature irresistibly given to pleasure at no matter what cost. A sybarite. A parasite, too. He was prayerfully thankful that appreciation of his danger had come before she had sapped from him all physical and spiritual vitality, but her future troubled him even while he assured himself that he knew its road, and laughed ruefully at the picture of her flitting from mate to mate. A feverish impatience gripped him. Somehow he must contrive to get himself out of the slough into which his amorous folly had precipitated him. 3 years, good God! At the moment, those 3 years seemed the most precious of his life, and he had foolishly thrown them away. He had drifted pleasantly, peacefully, without landmarks, would be drifting yet but for the death of a friend whose final affairs had brought him away. He started. Death. Perhaps she would die. How that would simplify matters for him. But no, she would not die. He laughed without amusement. She would not die. She would outlast him, damn her. An angry resentment, sharp and painful as a whiplash, struck him. Its passing left him calm and determined. He braced himself and continued to walk. He had decided he would stay. With this decision, he seemed to be reborn. He felt cool, refreshed, as if he had stepped out from a warm-scented place into a cold, brisk breeze. He was happy. The world had turned to silver and gold, and life again became a magical adventure. Even the placards in the shops shone with the light of paradise upon them. One caught and beheld and held his eye. Travel. Yes, he would travel. Lose himself in India, China, the South Seas. Radiance from the most battered vehicle and the meanest pedestrian. Gladness flooded him. He was free. A year, thick with various adventures, had slid by since that spring day on which he had wrenched himself free. He had lived, been happy, and with no woman in his life. The break had been simple, a telegram hinting at prolonged business and indefinite return. There had been no reply. This had annoyed him, but he told himself it was what he had expected. He would not admit that perhaps he had missed her letter in his wanderings. He had persuaded himself to believe what he wanted to believe, that she had not cared. Actually, there had been confusion in his mind, a complex of thoughts which made it difficult to know what he really had thought. He had imagined that he shuddered at the idea that she had accepted the most generous offer. He pitied her. There was, too, a touch of sadness, a sense of something lost, which he irritably explained on the score of her beauty. Beauty of any kind always stirred him. Too bad a woman like that couldn't be decent. He was well rid of her. But what had she done? How had he taken it? His contemptuous mood visualized her at times, laughing merrily at some jest made by his successor, or again sitting silent, staring into the fire. He would be conscious of every detail of her appearance, her hair simply arranged, her soft dark eyes, her delicate chin propped on hands rivaling the perfection of La Gioconda's. Sometimes there would be a reversion to the emotions which had ensnared him, when he ached with yearning, when he longed for her again. Such moments were rare. Another year passed, during which his life had widened, risen, and then crashed. Dead? How could she be dead? Dead in childbirth, they had told him, both his mistress and the child she had borne him. She had been dead on that spring day when, resentful and angry at her influence in his life, he had reached out toward freedom, to find only a mirage. For he saw quite plainly that now he would never be free. It was she who had escaped him. Each time he had cursed and wondered, it had been a dead woman whom he had cursed, and about whom he had wondered. He shivered. He seemed always to be cold now. Well rid of her. How well he had not known, nor how easily. She was dead, and he had cursed her. But one didn't curse the dead. Didn't one? Damn her. Why couldn't she have lived, or why hadn't she died sooner? For long months he had wondered how she had arranged her life, and all the while she had done nothing but to complete it by dying. The futility of all his speculations exasperated him. His old resentment returned. She had spoiled his life, first by living, and then by dying. He hated the fact that she had finished with him rather than he with her. He could not forgive her. Forgive her? She was dead. He felt somehow that, after all, the dead did not care if you forgave them or not. Gradually his mind became puppet to a disturbing tension which drove it back and forth between two thoughts. He had left her. She was dead. These two facts became lodged in his mind like burrs, pricking at his breaking faculties. As he recalled the manner of his leaving her, it seemed increasingly brutal. She had died loving him, bearing him a child, and he had left her. He tried to shake off the heavy mental dejection which weighed him down, but his former will and determination deserted him. The vitality of the past, forever dragging him down to black depression, frightened him. The mental fog, thick as soot, into which the news of her death had trapped him, appalled him. He must get himself out. A wild anger seized him. He began to think of his own death, self-inflicted, with feeling that defied analysis. His zest for life became swallowed up in the rising tide of sorrow and mental chaos which was engulfing him. As autumn approached, with faint notice on his part, his anger and resentment retreated, leaving in their wake a gentle stir of regret and remorse. Imperceptibly, he grew physically weary. A strange sensation of loneliness and isolation enveloped him. A species of timidity came upon him. He felt an unhappy remoteness from people, and began to edge away from life. His deepening sense of isolation drove him more and more back upon his memories. Sunk in his armchair before the fire, he passed the days and sometimes the nights, for he had lost count of these, merged as they were into one another. His increasing mental haziness had rejected the fact of her death. Often she was there with him, just beyond the firelight or the candlelight. She talked and laughed with him. Sometimes at night he woke to see her standing over him or sitting in his chair before the dying fire. By some mysterious process, the glory of first love flamed again in him. He forgot that he had ever parted, that they had ever parted. His twisted memories visioned her with him in places where she had never been. He had forgotten all but the past, and That was brightly distorted. He sat waiting for her. He seemed to remember that she had promised to come. Outside, the street was quiet. She was late. Why didn't she come? Childish tears fell over his cold cheeks. He sat weeping in front of the sinking fire. A nameless dread seized him. She would not come. In the agony of his disappointment, he did not see that the fire had died and the candles had sputtered out. He sat wrapped in immeasurable sadness. He knew that she would not come. Something in his thought fired his disintegrating brain. She would not come. Then he must go to her. He rose, shaking with cold, and groped toward the door. Yes, he would go to her. The gleam of a street light through a French window caught his attention. He stumbled toward it. His cold fingers fumbled a moment with the catch, but he tore it open with a spark of his old determination and power, and stepped out, and down to the pavement 100 feet below.